For centuries, the forests of Central America have concealed one of the greatest archaeological landscapes on Earth. From above, the jungle looks almost impenetrable, an endless canopy of green stretching toward the horizon. Beneath it lie the ruins of the ancient Maya, temples, plazas, and entire cities slowly swallowed by vegetation. Archaeologists have known about many of these places for generations, but from the ground, the jungle hides almost everything. A mound covered in trees can look completely natural. A raised strip of earth disappears beneath roots and undergrowth. Structures separated by only a short distance can remain invisible to researchers walking right between them. So archaeologists started looking at the jungle differently, not from the ground, but from the sky. Aircraft carrying a technology called LIDAR began sending enormous numbers of laser pulses down through the canopy. Most struck leaves and branches, but some reached the forest floor. Once those measurements were processed, researchers could digitally strip away the vegetation from the resulting model, and the jungle began to disappear. What emerged underneath wasn't just another forgotten temple. It was the outline of an entire ancient landscape, built, modified, and connected by people, on a scale that had been extraordinarily difficult to see from below. Which raised a remarkable question. How much of the Maya world had been hiding in plain sight all along? In 2018, researchers published the results of a major LIDAR survey covering more than 2,000 square kilometers of northern Guatemala. The images revealed more than 60,000 previously undocumented archaeological features: buildings, terraces, roads and causeways, defensive works, canals, and other modifications carved into the landscape. Individually, none of these things rewrote Maya history. Together, they revealed something much larger. The ancient Maya had transformed this land far more extensively than anyone could easily recognize beneath the modern forest. Areas that seem isolated today were once connected. Land that looks wild now carried the traces of agriculture and settlement. And ceremonial centers that appeared to stand alone were often part of much broader networks of human activity. Researchers used this new information to reassess how many people had lived across the Maya lowlands and how they had used the land to support themselves. The picture that emerged wasn't a single enormous city hidden beneath Guatemala. It was something more complicated. Different settlements at different scales, connected to landscapes shaped over generations, with the forest concealing much of that complexity from view. Perhaps the most striking realization was simpler than any single discovery. The Maya landscape visible today is not the landscape the Maya themselves would have known. To understand that world, we have to remove the forest. Imagine standing here more than 1,000 years ago. The dense jungle surrounding many ruins today wouldn't have covered everything the way it does now. Around important settlements stood homes, fields, reservoirs, terraces, and routes connecting one community to the next. People moved along raised causeways. Farmers worked land that had been deliberately shaped and managed. Water had to be collected, stored, and controlled through the seasons. And rising above it all was monumental architecture. Pyramids, palaces, and ceremonial complexes built without any of the machinery we'd rely on today. This wasn't empty wilderness with a few temples scattered through it. In some regions, it was a heavily managed human environment, and LIDAR let archaeologists see traces of that environment at a scale traditional surveys had always struggled to capture. Later surveys revealed still more. In the Mirador Basin of northern Guatemala, researchers identified a vast concentration of ancient Maya sites connected by an extensive network of causeways, much of it dating to the pre-classic period. But discoveries like these also carry a danger: the temptation to exaggerate them. Headlines about lost megacities can make it sound like an unknown civilization suddenly appeared beneath the trees. That isn't what happened. The Maya were never unknown. Their descendants are still here. What changed was our ability to see the physical scale and organization of ancient landscapes that centuries of vegetation had made almost impossible to map. And once we could see them, another question became harder to ignore. What happened to these places? For years, popular stories described the Maya as a civilization that mysteriously vanished. The truth is far more complicated. The Maya did not disappear. Millions of Maya people live today, maintaining languages, traditions, and communities with roots reaching deep into the past. What changed dramatically were many of the great political centers of the southern Maya lowlands. During the final centuries of the Classic period, particularly around the 8th and 9th centuries, numerous cities experienced political upheaval, declining populations, and eventually abandonment or major transformation. There was no single moment when everything collapsed, and probably no single cause. Researchers have found evidence pointing toward periods of severe drought. Warfare intensified in some regions. Political systems came under pressure, and large populations still needed food and reliable water, even as environmental change made both harder to secure. Different cities felt these pressures differently. Some declined, others endured, and Maya societies carried on elsewhere long after many famous classic centers had lost much of their former power. Slowly, vegetation reclaimed what people had built. Stone disappeared beneath roots. Causeways faded beneath soil. Entire settlement patterns became almost impossible to recognize from ground level. A world shaped by millions of footsteps began to look, from below, like untouched forest. Until we learned how to see through it. There's something strange about looking at a LiDAR image of the Maya lowlands. At first, you see the forest. Then the vegetation is digitally stripped away, and beneath it, lines appear. Rectangles, platforms, roads, mounds. Shapes that, at first glance, appear unmistakably human-made. But even here, caution matters. LiDAR doesn't hand archaeologists finished answers, it hands them candidates. A shape on a laser scan isn't confirmed as a structure until someone walks out into the jungle and checks. Natural formations can occasionally mimic the outlines of human construction, which is exactly why researchers still have to go into the field and investigate each site directly. A scan can't tell you who lived in a building, exactly when it was built, or what took place there. What LiDAR gives archaeologists is something earlier generations could only dream of. A view of the larger landscape. And that has changed the kinds of questions they can ask. Not simply, where's the next pyramid, but how communities were connected, how food was produced, how water was controlled, where boundaries were defended, and how densely people once inhabited these regions. Every new survey adds another piece to that picture, and perhaps the most intriguing part is how much still lies beyond it. Tonight, the forests of Guatemala are dark again. The roads visible in laser scans sit silent. The fields are gone. Trees grow where homes once stood. If you walked through parts of this landscape without knowing what lay beneath your feet, you might never realize you were moving through the remains of an ancient human world. That may be the real mystery of LiDAR. It didn't reveal a civilization nobody knew existed. It revealed how much of a civilization we already knew about, we still hadn't managed to see. For centuries, archaeology depended on what could be reached, excavated, and recognized from the ground. Now, technology can trace patterns stretching across entire landscapes, and somewhere beyond the areas already mapped, beneath millions of trees, there may still be roads no researcher has followed, settlements not yet documented, structures still resting beneath roots and soil. Not evidence of some impossible lost civilization, but something more interesting still. More chapters of a human story we've only begun to map. Because sometimes history isn't truly lost. Sometimes we simply haven't learned how to see it yet. If you enjoy uncovering the forgotten corners of history, subscribe to Unknown Archive. There are still plenty of pages left unopened.